The mummified remains of an American outlaw were once displayed in a children's amusement park for years without anyone realizing. Elmer McCurdy, born in January 1880, started off life on a bumpy note. He was an illegitimate child. His father is unknown, but it's rumored he might have been one of his mother's cousins. As a teenager, Elmer began drinking heavily. He joined the US Army in 1907 and was trained in demolition using explosives, a skill that would later fuel his life of crime. On November 7th, 1910, he was honourably discharged from the army, and using the skills he'd learned, began robbing banks and trains. His final robbery took place on October 4th, 1911, when McCurdy and his two accomplices robbed a passenger train by accident. They had initially been targeting a train containing $400,000 in cash, but the one they stopped only had $46 on board. It was later described as one of the smallest in the history of train robberies. Following this failure, Elmer retreated to a ranch where he drank whiskey until the early hours of the morning. It was in these early hours that 3 deputy sheriffs tracked McCurdy to said ranch using bloodhounds. They waited until first light but were spotted by Elmer, and he opened fire on them. Following a shootout that lasted around an hour, he was eventually struck and killed. His death is not where the story ends though, far from it. McCurdy was taken to the undertaker Joseph L. Johnson, but as no one came forward to claim the body, Johnson refused to bury it for free. Instead, he preserved it using arsenic and left the remains of Elmer McCurdy in the corner of his funeral home with a sign that read, "The bandit who wouldn't give up." Many people came especially to see him, and they would each pay a nickel. He became a very popular tourist attraction and drew attention from far and wide. Eventually, 2 men claiming to be McCurdy's long-lost brothers showed up to claim the body. After gaining permission from a local attorney, they took custody of Elmer's remains. It turns out that these men were of no relation whatsoever and instead belonged to a travelling carnival. They featured McCurdy for 6 years in a display titled "The Outlaw Who Would Never Be Captured Alive." For the next 54 years, McCurdy bounced around from different owner to different owner. Along the way, his body fully mummified, and one of his ears was lost in an accident. By 1976, he was in California at the Pike Amusement Park. TV show The $6 Million Man was filming an episode at the Pike, and one of the show's prop men moved what he believed to be a mannequin. An arm broke off, revealing human bone. Police were called and an autopsy was performed, which eventually led back to Elmer McCurdy. On April the 22nd, 1977, he was finally laid to rest in Oklahoma. 300 people attended the funeral, and after his burial, 60 centimeters of concrete was poured onto the coffin to ensure it could never be stolen. For many years, teenagers would tell stories of a man with no face who only came out at night and walked along the State Route 351. He became an urban legend around western Pennsylvania, and many people would go out at night to try and find him. The Green Man, Raymond Robinson, was in fact just an ordinary man who at 8 years old suffered severe electrical burns after climbing a pole. He defied doctors' expectations by surviving, but was left severely disfigured. He lost both his eyes, his nose, and right arm. After the accident, he avoided most people and would never go out during the day. Every night, however, he would go on long walks, using a stick to guide the way. This was far from a safe trip for Raymond, as he was struck by cars multiple times. This never deterred him though, and he continued his nighttime walks for many years until his death in 1985. Even though Raymond tried his best to avoid human contact, he would occasionally be cornered and stopped for a short chat, normally in exchange for a beer or a few cigarettes. Most people who reported meeting him said he was a really nice man and very friendly whenever stops, sometimes even sharing stories of the accident itself. It truly is a shame that Raymond Robertson was forced to live his life in the shadows because of an accident he suffered as a child. One of Canada's most successful lawyers had a party trick, but unlike most harmless party tricks, this resulted in his death. Gary Hoy was a very successful and much loved member of the Holden Day Wilson law firm in Toronto. He was also a big fan of architecture and took huge pride in the strength of his office windows that were supposedly unbreakable. He believed in them so much that when prospective law students were on a tour of the building, he would pull out his go-to party trick. Gary Hoy would take a running start and throw his full body weight against the window. He did this numerous times without fail before on July the 9th, 1993, eventually pushed his luck too far. The window separated from its frame, sending Gary falling 24 floors to his death. The shock of his death eventually led to Holden Day Wilson closing down just 3 years later. Perhaps the cruelest thing of all was the fact that Gary was right all along. The window stayed perfectly intact, even after falling 24 floors. The window frame, however, was far from unbreakable. In the 1820s, French naval officer Jules de Ville reported seeing waves reach as high as 100 feet whilst travelling through the Indian Ocean. Despite being well respected and backed up by 3 colleagues as eyewitnesses, he was publicly ridiculed at the time by the French president, as it was believed that waves could not reach higher than 30 feet. For the next century, any reports or claims of these 100-foot rogue waves were laughed off as sailor stories. That was until over 100 years later, in 1995, when an oil rig in Norway successfully recorded a wave that reached 84 feet. This sent shockwaves through the scientific community, proving the existence of these rogue waves once and for all. And since then, since the introduction of the smartphone and other camera devices, these rogue waves have been caught on camera multiple times and studied by scientists throughout the world.